I came back to the house I had built with my own hands, the place I thought would hold me through my final years, and yet it no longer felt like home. The surgery had left me frail. My chest still burned when I breathed too deeply, and every step reminded me of how easily life could slip away. I had survived the knife, the long nights in the hospital, the cold quiet of machines keeping me alive. I thought coming home would bring peace. Instead, it brought something I didn't recognize. The first thing I noticed was the mantle. For 37 years, it held pieces of my life. Family photos, Sarah's smile frozen in time, the children as they grew. Now, it was bare. Clean. Stripped of memory. My suitcase slipped from my hand as my eyes scanned the room. Even the lamp Sarah had found at a garage sale decades ago was gone. What replaced it was newer, colder, arranged by color like a showroom. "Where are my things?" I asked, my voice weaker than I wanted it to be. Celeste stepped out from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. "We were just cleaning up. It was getting cluttered." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Clutter. The word hit me like an insult. Memories weren't clutter. They were all I had left of Sarah, of years that couldn't be bought back. Then Ethan looked up from the chair. My chair. He barely moved, barely acknowledged me. His laptop glowed in the dark of the living room. "Dad, we need to talk about this house's future." The words were casual, but the tone cut deep. He didn't ask about my chest, my breathing, or the long hours of surgery. He didn't ask how I felt, whether I was ready to walk stairs, or how lonely the hospital had been. No, his first concern was the future of the house. I set my discharge papers on the table, my hands trembling more from anger than weakness. "Future? This is my home." He crossed his arms. "You're not getting younger. The stairs are dangerous. We just want you safe." Safe. A neat word. But it sounded more like a verdict than concern. I walked toward the garage, the place where Sarah's handwriting still marked recipe boxes, where my tools had lived for decades. My chest tightened, but not from the scar. From what I saw, cardboard boxes stacked high, labeled with a thick marker. My name on every one of them. Oscar's items. Storage. I touched the edge of one box, recognizing the old leather handle of my toolbox poking through. 40 years of work reduced to storage. "Why are my things in boxes?" Ethan filled the doorway behind me, his figure shadowed by the fading light. "We thought a different arrangement might be better." "Different arrangement?" My voice cracked. "This is my house, son." He looked at me as if I were already gone. "Dad, we live here too. We do. Not you and me, not family, just we." As if I had already been written out of the story. I turned away, forcing myself up the stairs, each step burning against the tender scar in my chest. I had fought for my life in that hospital. Now, I felt like I was fighting for it here too. Behind me, I heard their voices, low, discussing something I couldn't make out. Planning. Always planning. When I reached my bedroom, I sat heavily on the bed. The room was the only part of the house that hadn't been stripped. The photos on the nightstand were fewer than before, but at least they were still there. Sarah's face smiled back at me, her hand resting on mine in a memory that felt too far away. I lay back, discharge papers crumpled in my lap, and closed my eyes. I told myself tomorrow would be better, that tonight was only awkwardness, that families needed time to readjust. But as I listened to the sounds below, dishes clinking, a television humming, soft laughter, I realized the house sounded lived in. Only it didn't sound like I was part of it anymore. Later that night, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ethan's weight creaked past my door, then stopped. For a moment I waited, expecting the knock, the soft words, the check to see if I was all right. But none came. The sound of his door shutting was all I got. I pressed my hand against my chest, not for the scar, but for the emptiness inside. The machines had healed my body, but what had broken in this house felt far more dangerous. The next morning, the light through the blinds felt harsh. My body was heavy, weak. I tried to sit, but dizziness washed over me. My arm throbbed, and the tightness in my chest returned. I remembered the doctor's warning. If you feel sudden pressure, shortness of breath, or dizziness, call immediately. I reached for the phone on the dresser, but it was too far. My legs gave out when I tried to stand. I called out, my voice cracking. "Ethan! Ethan, I need help!" Silence. Then the faint sound of coffee brewing downstairs. The smell drifted up, as if life was continuing, normal and undisturbed. "Ethan, please!" I shouted again, the sound tearing at my throat. Finally, footsteps, slow, unhurried. He appeared in the doorway, hair messy, still in pajamas, calm as if nothing were happening. "What is it, Dad?" he asked, as if I had called him about a loose light bulb. I pressed my hand hard against my chest. "Call an ambulance. I feel terrible." He stared at me, then at the phone. His face remained cold, detached. "No, Dad," he said finally. "I won't call." The words froze me more than the pain did. I looked at him, my only son, and saw not fear, not love, not even hesitation, just decision. "What are you saying?" "I could die." He slipped my phone into his pocket, his voice flat. Maybe that would be for the best. And in that moment I understood. My return wasn't a return at all. It was the beginning of something darker. The silence after his words was heavier than the pain in my chest. I sat there, staring at the closed door, listening to his footsteps fade back down the stairs. Every sound in the house felt louder than before. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint clatter of dishes, the low drone of the television. Normal sounds. But to me they were reminders of how easily my son had chosen to ignore me, how easily he had decided I wasn't worth saving. I pressed my palm against my chest and tried to slow my breathing, but the pressure only grew tighter. I thought of Sarah. If she were here, she would have dialed before I even finished asking. She would have been beside me, steadying my hand, whispering that I wasn't alone. But Sarah was gone, and the only family I had left had just shown me that my life was an inconvenience. The night crept in slowly, shadows stretching across the floor. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the house reminding me that I was not in control anymore. I was a guest in the very place I had built, and more than that, I was being managed, quietly erased, like an old photograph fading in a frame. When I heard Ethan's door shut for the night, I felt the weight of it settle deep inside me. He hadn't checked once to see if I was still breathing. Celeste's laughter floated faintly through the walls, light and untroubled. It struck me then. They were living their lives as if I had already been buried. The next morning, I tried to rise early, hoping to reclaim a fragment of normalcy. But the moment I sat up, dizziness swept over me, and I fell back onto the mattress. My scar ached, the tight pull of stitches reminding me of my fragility. I called out again, weaker this time. "Ethan, can you come here?" No answer. I tried, louder, though my voice broke halfway. "Ethan, I don't feel right." From downstairs came the clinking of a spoon against a cup, the sound of a coffee pot dripping. No urgency, no footsteps rushing to me. Just the calm rhythm of his morning, as though I were background noise. Minutes dragged like hours. I pushed myself to my feet, bracing against the dresser for balance. The phone was still across the room, but when I reached for it, I felt the sudden burn of pain shoot down my arm. My legs gave way and I collapsed to the carpet. The sound barely registered against the soft thud of footsteps moving casually below me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking of how strange it felt to be trapped in my own body. To know that help was only steps away, but the one person I had raised, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders, was choosing not to act. The day passed like that, me drifting between shallow sleep and waves of pain, calling out now and then, only to be met with silence. Once I thought I heard him pause at the bottom of the stairs, but the steps never came up. By evening, I dragged myself back to bed. My body was too weak to resist, too exhausted to fight. I stared at the window, the faint glow of the streetlights reminding me that life outside went on. Neighbors cooked dinners, watered gardens, made phone calls, and I lay here, unseen, unheard, abandoned by my own blood. That night, I tried to remember Ethan as a boy. I thought of the time he'd scraped his knee on the driveway and cried until I carried him inside. The way he clung to me, burying his face in my shoulder, trusting me to make it better. I thought of teaching him to ride his bike, of his laughter echoing when he finally managed it without falling. For hours I searched those memories for the boy who once needed me, who once loved me. But the more I searched, the more I realized he was gone. By the second night, the house no longer felt like mine. Every sound reminded me that I had been pushed out of my own story. The kitchen clatter below belonged to them. The living room chatter belonged to them. Even the chair that had held me for decades now belonged to him. I lay awake, listening to the quiet, wondering if this was what it meant to be erased. Not in one violent act, but slowly, piece by piece, until nothing of you mattered anymore. In the dark, I whispered to myself, tomorrow will be different. But the words carried no weight. They felt like lies I needed to tell myself just to keep breathing. On the third morning, I woke with the same crushing pressure in my chest. I didn't bother calling out this time. I already knew the answer. The walls of this room, once a sanctuary, now felt like bars. My son didn't need to drag me to a hospital or lock me away. He just had to keep ignoring me, and the house would finish the job for him. As I pressed my forehead to the cool wood of the door, I realized something chilling. I was not just weak. I was trapped. My son didn't see me as a father anymore. He saw me as a burden, an obstacle. And in his silence, I heard the truth. This house no longer belonged to me. Neither did the family inside it. The morning light cut across the room, too bright, too sharp. I knew the difference between the normal soreness of healing and what I was feeling now. This wasn't stiffness or fatigue, it was danger. The kind the surgeon had warned me about. In clipped, clinical words. Chest pressure, shortness of breath, pain radiating down the arm. Call immediately, he had said. Don't wait. I tried to rise, but my body betrayed me. My legs buckled, and I collapsed against the bed frame. The room tilted sideways, and I clung to the dresser just to stay upright. The phone was there, inches away, but it might as well have been miles. My chest burned, every breath shallow and ragged. I did the only thing left to me. I called for my son. Ethan, help me, please. The silence stretched so long I wondered if I had lost consciousness. Then faintly, the sound of coffee brewing. Downstairs, the television humming, Celeste's voice drifting in with casual conversation. My world was falling apart, but theirs carried on untouched. I tried again, louder this time, the effort tearing at my throat. Ethan, I need help. Finally, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, not rushed. Each creak on the stairs told me he wasn't hurrying. Relief mixed with dread as I waited for him to appear. When the door opened, Ethan stood there in his pajamas, hair uncombed, his expression calm. Too calm. He looked at me slumped against the dresser, sweat beading on my forehead, my body trembling. His voice carried no urgency, no fear, just distance. What is it, Dad? I gasped for breath. Call an ambulance. I can't breathe. I feel terrible. He stepped further into the room, his eyes scanning me the way a stranger might survey a problem they had no real investment in. Then he looked at the phone on the dresser. Slowly, without a word, he picked it up, slipped it into his pocket, and turned back to me. "No, Dad, I won't call." The words landed colder than any diagnosis. My mind struggled to catch up with what he had just said. "What are you talking about? I could die." He met my eyes, his face unreadable. Maybe that would be for the best. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard him right, but the stillness in the room confirmed it. My son, the boy I raised, the man I trusted, was telling me my death would make his life easier. The betrayal was sharper than the pain in my chest. "Ethan." My voice cracked, more from heartbreak than weakness. "I'm your father." He leaned against the doorway, arms folded. His tone was detached, almost businesslike. "You're old. You're sick. This house is worth $300,000. Celeste and I have plans. You've had your time. It's our turn now." The words cut deeper than any scalpel, not just because of what they meant, but because of how easily he said them. As if my life was an entry on a ledger, as if decades of sacrifice could be erased by a number. I thought of Sarah again, of how she had begged me to protect our family, to raise Ethan with values that mattered. I thought of the nights I stayed, late at work so he could go to college without debt, of the birthday parties, the scraped knees, the endless hours of being there. And here he stood, telling me I was nothing but a burden. The pain spread across my chest, radiating into my arm. But a different kind of pain gnawed deeper. The realization that my son didn't see me as family anymore. He saw me as an obstacle. I tried to push myself to my feet, to reach him, to grab his shoulders and force him to remember who he was. But my legs gave way, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping. He watched me, calm, detached. Then he turned toward the door. "You should rest, Dad. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Ethan," I shouted, though it came out more like a whisper. "Please, don't do this." He paused at the threshold, glanced back once, and for a flicker of a second I thought I saw pity. But it was gone as quickly as it came. His voice was flat. "Burden has a way of solving itself." The door shut with a quiet click. Then came the sound that broke me more than anything else, the lock turning. He had sealed me inside. I pounded weakly on the door, my fists too frail to make noise that mattered. "Ethan, open this door!" My pleas echoed into silence, swallowed by the hum of life continuing downstairs. Coffee, dishes, television. My son and his wife living comfortably while I fought for every breath, locked in a room I once called my own. I slumped to the floor, my head against the wood, sweat soaking through my shirt. My scar throbbed, my chest burned, and yet it was the betrayal that hollowed me out. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue, didn't lash out. He just calmly chose not to save me. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't just sick. I was trapped. And the son I thought would be my caretaker in old age had become my jailer. If you're having fun, tap the like button and write your location in the comments. The hours blurred together after Ethan locked the door. I don't remember when daylight shifted to darkness, only that the room grew colder and the walls pressed in closer. My chest still ached, the scar tugging with every breath, but the sharper pain was knowing my own son had chosen to abandon me. Every sound from downstairs, the clink of silverware, the low murmur of the television, reminded me how ordinary their lives carried on, as if I no longer existed. I pressed my hand against the carpet, willing my body to move, to crawl, to do anything but lie there and wait for the end he seemed so comfortable with. Sarah's voice filled my memory, steady and firm. She used to tell me, "You're stubborn, Oscar. too stubborn to quit. It was her voice that kept me pushing, inch by inch, across the floor. The dresser loomed just out of reach, the phone gone, stolen by the son who once begged me to protect him from nightmares. I turned my gaze toward the window. Beyond it, I knew, was the street, the world, and perhaps someone who might still see me as worth saving. Hal Jenkins lived next door. For 15 years we'd waved at each other over fences, traded the occasional tool, shared small talk about weather and repairs. He was no family, but he had never turned away from me. The distance between me and the window looked impossible. 12 feet across a room, but for me, in that state, it might as well have been a mile. Still, I began the crawl. My arms trembled, my stitches pulled, sweat dripped onto the carpet, but I kept going. Every inch forward was a refusal to die. The way Ethan wanted me to, quietly, conveniently, without protest. When I reached the window, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Outside, the world glowed with morning light. Hal's driveway stretched below, his newspaper still lying near the curb. Relief stirred faintly in me. Soon, he would step out with his coffee, just as he always did. If I could hold on, if I could get his attention, I might survive. I forced the latch open, the paint cracking as it broke free. The rusty squeal echoed in the stillness of the room. I leaned out, my voice little more than a rasp. Hal, help me. At first, nothing. My throat burned from the effort, and panic flared that he hadn't heard. Then I saw him, bending, over his garden, gloves on, inspecting his rows of tomatoes. He looked up at the sound, eyes narrowing against the sun. Oscar? What happened? The relief nearly buckled me. Please, call an ambulance, I can't breathe. Hal's face shifted instantly from confusion to urgency. He dropped his trowel, brushing dirt from his knees. I'll call right now. Hold on. No. Locked in, I croaked. Can't get out. His expression hardened with disbelief, but he didn't waste time pressing me for details. He turned, striding quickly toward his house. Through his kitchen window, I saw him pick up his phone, gesturing wildly as he spoke into it. The sight of another human being fighting for me when my own son had refused brought tears I didn't know I had left. I slumped back against the frame, chest heaving, the morning air filling my lungs with something that felt almost like hope. An ambulance would come. Professionals would arrive. Maybe I had bought myself another chance. But relief was short-lived. The floor creaked below, heavy footsteps climbing the stairs. Ethan. He must have heard me calling out. My heart hammered harder, fear surging through the fragile hope. The footsteps stopped outside the door. For a moment, silence. Then the sharp twist of the lock, the door swinging open with violent force. He filled the doorway, his face twisted, with rage I had never seen before. Gone was the calm detachment. In its place was something raw, feral, dangerous. What did you do? His voice shook with fury. I tried to crawl back from the window, my arms trembling. I called for help. He crossed the room in seconds, grabbing me by the shoulders, his fingers digging into the stitches until I gasped. His face hovered inches from mine, eyes wild. Listen to me. If you tell anyone about this, I'll make your life hell. You're insane, I whispered. You're my son. His grip tightened. His grip. I'm your son, who's waited long enough for what's mine. The words poured out, unfiltered, like a confession. He shoved me back onto the bed, his voice cracking with desperation. Do you know what it's like watching you cling to life while we're stuck here like prisoners? That house is worth $300,000. We have plans, Dad, and you're in the way. Each word was a knife. I stared at him, breathless, broken, but somewhere inside me, a spark caught. He thought I would crumble under the weight of betrayal, but instead, something hardened. If I could survive this moment, this rage, this cruelty, then I could expose it. I could turn his calculation into his downfall. The sound of sirens grew faint in the distance, then louder. Ethan's head snapped toward the window, panic flashing across his face. For the first time, I saw him falter. He realized the plan he'd been counting on was unraveling. He looked back at me, fury boiling beneath his skin. "You'll regret this," but I only held his gaze. My body might have been broken, but my will was not. I whispered, more to myself than to him, "I will survive you." And for the first time in days, I believed it. The sirens grew louder until they filled the air outside, their urgency vibrating through the glass. Ethan's anger twisted into panic as he stood frozen in the middle of the room. For a moment, I thought he might lash out again. But instead, he straightened his shirt, ran a hand through his hair and tried to rebuild the mask he wore so well. From the window, I could see Hal at the end of his driveway, waving the paramedics toward the house. Two of them stepped out of the ambulance with practiced speed, one carrying equipment, the other already speaking into a radio. Their presence was sharp, professional, and impossible to deceive. Ethan moved quickly, leaving the room. I heard his voice downstairs, calm and rehearsed. "It's a misunderstanding. My father's confused. He sometimes thinks doors are locked when they aren't." His tone was smooth, almost soothing, as if he were the responsible son caught in an unfortunate mix-up. I forced myself to the window, leaning out despite the burn in my chest. "Up here!" I shouted with everything left in me. "Second floor! I'm locked in!" The female paramedic's head snapped upward, her eyes locking onto mine. "Are you experiencing chest pain?" she called. "Yes. Please, hurry." Her expression hardened. She turned to her partner. "We need immediate access." Downstairs, Ethan's performance faltered. "He gets confused. It's not necessary." The younger paramedic's voice cut through his protest, firm and final. "Sir, open the door now." There was silence, then hesitation. I knew my son well enough to picture his mind racing, weighing lies against consequences. "Unlock it immediately," the woman repeated, "or we'll escalate to law enforcement for obstruction and possible elder abuse." The words hit like thunder. For the first time, Ethan had no room left to maneuver. I heard keys clatter, hurried footsteps on the stairs, and then the lock on my door turned. He opened it with a forced look of concern, speaking loudly enough for them to hear. "Dad, I'm right here. The paramedics are here to check on you." But the mask no longer fooled anyone. Within seconds, the professionals were at my side, lifting me carefully, checking vitals, speaking in clipped medical shorthand. Their voices were urgent but steady, each word carrying the weight of training that had nothing to do with family loyalty and everything to do with survival. They slid an oxygen mask over my face, and I felt air rush into my lungs, steady and cool. The room blurred, but their presence anchored me. As they worked, I caught Ethan's eyes. He stood in the corner, watching, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. For the first time, he looked like the one trapped. By the time they wheeled me out, my heart was still pounding, but not just from the pain. I knew something fundamental had shifted. Ethan had shown me the truth. He had gambled on my silence, my weakness, my dependence. But I had survived, and that survival itself was a kind of rebellion. The hospital took me in again, familiar bright lights and beeping machines surrounding me. Nurses checked my lines, doctors explained the danger I had been in, but all I heard was the quiet refrain in my head. He tried to let me die. The first night back in a hospital bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling tiles. My son had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. It would have been easy to slip into despair, to accept the role he had written for me, the confused old man, too weak to resist. But anger steadied me. Not the hot anger of impulse, but the cold, patient kind that waits and plans, For 2 days, I let myself recover. The nurse's kindness was a balm, a reminder that compassion still existed. Not once did Ethan or Celeste visit. Not a call, not a flower, not a question about whether I would live. Their absence was its own answer. I had lost my family, but I had gained clarity. On the second night, as the ward quieted and the hallway lights dimmed, I whispered to myself, "This is not revenge. This is justice." The plan began forming in my mind, quiet and precise. I would gather proof, not accusations. I would let Ethan's own words condemn him, and when the time came, I would not raise my voice or plead. I would stand steady, with evidence no one could ignore. I thought of Sarah again. She had always believed in fairness, in consequences. "People show you who they are when pressure comes," she once told me. Ethan had shown me. Now it was my turn to respond. By the third day, the doctors said I was stable. They spoke of monitoring, of new medications, of careful routines. I nodded, but inside, my focus was already beyond the hospital. I wasn't only thinking about survival anymore. I was thinking about truth, about legacy. When Dr. Simmons leaned over my bed and asked gently, "Oscar, do you have support at home?" I almost laughed. Support? The very people who should have held me up had tried to bury me. "I can handle it," I said instead. My voice was calm, steady, but inside, I felt the quiet weight of purpose settling in. Because now I knew survival was only the beginning. Justice was still waiting. When they discharged me, the sun outside felt different, warmer, sharper, as if the air itself knew I was walking out with more than medications in a paper bag. I had clarity now. Survival had given me something my son had not expected: time. And with time came the chance to set things right. The taxi ride home was quiet. The driver asked about my hospital stay, but I barely heard him. My mind was fixed on the house waiting at the end of the street. Not as home, not anymore. It had become a stage, and I was preparing for the final act. Inside, the rooms looked unchanged. Furniture in its place, photographs returned to shelves as though nothing had happened. But I could feel the falseness in every detail. They hadn't done it for me. They had done it for appearances, to cover their tracks, to keep the story neat. I went straight upstairs to my room. From the dresser drawer, I pulled out a small recorder I had bought years earlier, back when Sarah wanted me to preserve her stories for the grandchildren. My hand trembled as I held it. Back then it was meant for memories. Now it would capture truth. I tested it, my voice low. June 11th. Locked in my bedroom during cardiac emergency. Son refused to call for help. The playback was crisp, each word sharp enough to cut. I slipped the device into my shirt pocket and felt the weight settle against my chest. It wasn't heavy, but it carried the burden of what came next. That evening, I called the police. My voice was steady, factual. "I need to report an elder abuse case. Attempted murder through medical neglect." They asked questions. I gave dates, details, names. Then I made a request. "Send officers at 7:30 tonight. By then, I'll have additional evidence." When I hung up, I sat in the living room chair. My chair. The one Ethan had claimed while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed. Now it became my anchor. I waited there, calm, while the house settled around me. The front door opened at 6. Ethan walked in, still in his business clothes, his face set in that careful mask. He froze when he saw me seated. "Dad, you're home early." I kept my hands folded, my voice even. Hospital cleared me, said I was stable enough to talk. He shifted, uneasy. "Talk about what?" I leaned forward slightly, feeling the recorder against my chest. About inheritance, about patience, about sons who wait for fathers to die. The mask slipped for just a moment. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're implying. Yes, you do, I said quietly. We both know. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Be careful, Dad. You're confused. People won't believe. But before he could finish, Celeste appeared in the hallway, grocery bags in her arms. She froze at the sight of us, sensing the tension. Without a word, she retreated to the kitchen. She didn't want to be part of what was coming. The air in the room thickened. Outside, I saw movement through the window. 2 police officers approaching. Their uniforms unmistakable. Right on time. Ethan noticed them too, his face drained of color. What did you do? He whispered. I reached into my pocket and pressed stop on the recorder. Its work was done. Justice, I said simply. Something you forgot about. The doorbell rang, sharp and commanding. Ethan's composure shattered. He spun toward the bar, sound, panic flooding his voice. Dad, listen to me. But it was too late. When I opened the door, the officers stepped in with calm authority. Mr. Reynolds, we received your call. I nodded. Yes, I have evidence. Ethan tried to speak, but the female officer silenced him with a raised hand. I placed the recorder in her palm. She pressed play, and his own words filled the room. Maybe that would be for the best. You're old, sick. This house is worth $300,000. We have plans. Ethan's face twisted as if he could pull the words back, out of the air. But they were out now, clear and damning. The officers exchanged a glance. Sir, one said to Ethan, you're under arrest for elder abuse and unlawful imprisonment. The handcuffs clicked. Ethan's voice cracked, frantic. Dad, I'm your son, your only family. I met his eyes one last time. My son would never have done this. I don't know who you are. They let him out, his protests fading into the night air. The door shut softly behind them, leaving me in the quiet I hadn't known in months. Later, Celeste emerged from the kitchen, tears streaking her face. I'll be gone tomorrow. Divorce papers will come soon. She paused, her voice shaking. I'm sorry, Oscar. I should have stopped him. I only nodded. Her apology couldn't fix what was broken, but it was something. 17 days later, a for sale sign stood on the lawn. The house, once filled with love, then betrayal, would pass to someone new. My lawyer finalized the will,